Please note that this video has spoilers for the subject. Put off by how long this video is, don't worry, I try to jam-pack my videos with as much content and as much detail as I possibly can. Anything I feel I can comment on and that I feel you might be interested in, I pretty much put in the video. I try not to repeat myself and talk fairly fast. I got this either as a present or I got it on discount, so I did not pay very much money for this and am thus not bitter on account of that. Children of Men movie thoughts, and we're jumping with great force directly into notes taken while rewatching. And I should briefly note that I've watched this, I don't know, 3 or 4 times at least, possibly more. And before I get too into this, most of the notes in this section, pretty much all the notes that I made myself, where I didn't copy-paste someone else's so that I could comment on it, is voice-typed. And the voice-typing did not like neither Theo nor Ferran, so I just voice-typed Clive, as in Clive Owen, whenever his character. So if I accidentally say Clive instead of Theo or Ferran, that's why. It's not that I don't realize that's the character's name. Now, I love this movie, and this is set in 2027. When you read reviews online, still recording, a lot of people seem to think it's 2017. Now, the book is set in 2021. The book came out in 1991, the movie in 2007, so, you know, in both cases they pushed ahead a bit in time so that you could believe that that Britain would look like this, you know, in so and so much time. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure where people got the idea that it's 2017. You know, Wikipedia states 2027. The movie at the very start states 2027. I don't know. People got confused, evidently. Now, it is vitally important to save this one pregnant woman. The future depends on it. What she really needs is a craft table, a magic wand, and someone to feed her pickles. And this is where the notes that I recorded during the movie actually start. It's weird how a movie with so little exposition opens on such an exposition dump. And I'd also forgotten how many kind of exposition-y speeches there are. You know, it's Alfonso Cuarón, who directed it and wrote, you know, he said that he can't stand exposition, and yet there are these, I don't know, I guess he felt that it was probably written by the other people who wrote it, and he felt like it was such good material that he didn't want to, because you could, for at least some of it, you could, you know, narrow, you know, but they're good, you know, they're not annoying and, you know, unwieldy exposition dumps. Now, I think the movie really nicely establishes the world at the very, very start. One of the first things is this thing with, you know, baby Diego's dead, and you have the, oh, just FYI, I might swear in this video since they do in the movie. Yeah, you know, he's at in this coffee shop, and he's, you know, watching the news, and he walks out with his coffee, and the camera follows him all the way out, and it follows him as he walks, and then he stops to, you know, spike the coffee, and, you know, do a little wave to Jim Carrey, also sitting in the cafe, and the camera passes around, and yeah, you know, he's been out of the coffee shop for maybe, I don't know, I doubt it's more than 2 minutes at least, and explosion, and it just, yeah, it's so close, and that really nicely establishes how unstable this world is. Now, let's see. And, you know, at Clive's workplace, everyone's upset that baby Diego is dead. They're sitting there at their computers and watching, you know, footage of him to kind of, you know, remember, and yeah. And Jasper says, I'm glad you don't take cream and sugar. That really is how close it got. And there are tons of people who have exactly that experience. If there hadn't been traffic, I would have been there when it blew up, you know. Or if I hadn't gone out for this or that reason, I would have been, it just, so it really, yeah, very nicely establishes that. And I like the point by Jasper about how, you know, the government will ship suicide pills and antidepressants to people, but weed is still illegal. Now, you know, the pharmaceutical companies can't make as much money if weed is legal. I love, you know, Clive is ranting about, you know, the Human Project, and just, it was just, fuck, that's strong. I'm usually not into weed jokes, but when they're so well delivered, it just, yeah. No, I won't tell the joke now. It's been built up too much. Yes, that was a reference, not a misquote. And as so many groups like them, the fishes started out using violence and then went to spreading information to accomplish what they want. You know, there's very often that kind of, yeah, you know, a lot of revolutionaries think that if they use violence, they will scare the government into doing what they want. But yeah, a lot of governments are very resistant to that. And, you know, Theo's actually, yeah, I think I already accidentally called him Clive, didn't I? Theo's actually offended that she would offer my, you know, I don't need it, not from you. Again, not, I don't mean to actually quote. I'm trying to bring forth the essence of the line. I love the thing about your breath stinks. No, it doesn't. Yes, it does. And, of course, there is one or more religious groups that explains the infertility with sin. You've got something in your teeth. He loves these tiny little passive-aggressive moves. At least early in the movie. He doesn't really do them later on, does he? I think it might be part of that character development that a lot of people seem to think isn't in the movie. That thing in Madrid was a real blow to the arts. Priorities. And I really, Theo is very good at coming up with, you know, the fishes didn't give him that. They just said, this is what we want. But Theo is like, okay, what story should I tell my cousin so that he will, you know, provide the papers? And yeah, it's good stuff, you know, just off the top of my head. Didn't write anything, any details. You know, he's like, I met this girl, beautiful. I'm so in love with her. She's got this brother, and what was it, Brighton? He lives up in Brighton, and he's sick, and she really wants to visit him. I don't think he's gonna make it. I really would like her to be able to see him one last time. You know, just yeah. You know, if he said, well, my ex-wife paid me $5 grand to transport this woman, I don't know. Could you make that happen? That's, yeah. And he almost missed the bus to meet Julian because of gambling on races. That's, yeah, he really doesn't, at this point in the movie, yeah, he really doesn't care that much if he, you know, gets the, yeah. Let's see. This is what you always do. When it gets tough, you walk away. This is our stop. I really like that. And we get to the first of the, I think, 3 scenes with long takes, or especially long takes. There are a couple of other long takes. I quite like the Theo spiked the coffee for the cops with ketamine, and yeah, I don't have a lot to say about the long take. Just, they're all excellent. The way they often start with this kind of seemingly peaceful, seemingly safe situation, and then build and get to a crescendo. It's really nicely done, and I do realize that they're not technically completely uninterrupted long take. There are a couple of stitches of different takes of these scenes and some CGI, because there's some of the stuff they couldn't possibly do safely for real, but the movie hides it well enough, And I don't think the fact that they're not technically completely, done as just in one take, I don't think that cheapens the experience, but I respect the opinion of those who think they do. And Luke shoots the 2 cops and threatens Theo with the gun to get him back in the car. And while Miriam and Key engage in spiritual activity over Julian's body, Theo takes a drink and a smoke, and he does then break down crying. Clearly he does care. It's just that when bad things happen, he rejects the idea of some kind of spiritual, it enrages him, because if he's going to lose someone he cares about just like that, then what is there to have faith in? What is there to hope for? And I didn't note this, but I do appreciate, later when Key is, when Miriam is doing the spiritual stuff by herself, Key, I guess, kind of jokes about, she's not like, yeah, I guess it's more Theo that kind of isn't the most respectful of the, but yeah, Key like laughs at when he says it. So it is one of those things where really it doesn't bring that much comfort to anyone other than Miriam. I also didn't voice type note this, but since this whole video has spoilers, and yeah, I did remember to put the spoiler tag on. The last thing we see her do, she's sitting there next to Key, and Key is freaking out, and Miriam is like, please God, give Key let her realize she's strong enough to get through this as well. And I forget, is she the one who stands up, or does the guy order her to stand in the, for those who don't remember, in the refugee bus there at the very end, where he comes in and he's like, what's going on, who's, what, yeah, where at the end, Theo said, look, pee, poop, smell, that's how he gets rid of the guy. That scene, I forget if she gets up on her own, or it's the guy who tells her to get up, but he starts hitting her, and she holds on. She doesn't give up. She really does, yeah, she has faith, and it really does bring her hope, and really she does help take the focus off Key. I did not mean that pun. Yeah, in this video I'm going to be going back and forth between grave seriousness and kind of joking, as the movie does itself. Yeah, there's let's see. Yeah, the last thing we see, they drag her out of the bus, and they take her and they put a black bag over her head, and we don't know what happens to her after that, but yeah, it's very likely she just ends up in one of those cages, just like the rest of the, because they think she's a refugee. They don't care. Yeah, that is both the beginning and the end of their caring about her. You know, she's not one of us. She's not a real Brit, so she does not get to be treated as a human being. But that is that is a situation where a lot of people would no longer be able to hold on to their faith, and I really appreciate that the character is so consistent about it. She really does not give up. You know, I guess it might be interesting to see how she was before she met Key. But then I guess, yeah, she kind of, when she talks about how she realized that, you know, babies weren't making, you know, didn't survive being born anymore, all these abortions, miscarriages, yeah, there she sounds like, you know, she kind of, excuse me, she does not, back then she did not have the hope that she has had since meeting Key. And maybe on some level she does realize that by by praying in front of this guy, you know, not falling into line, she is sacrificing herself, and she accepts that. I like the line by Tomasz. She's a cod, an English fish. And Luke is made the new leader of the fishes. I quite like the whole discussion there. I really appreciate that there are so many movies where it's just, you know, okay, we gotta, you know, parts of this movie are, you know, based in part of the way are, you know, action scenes. I've seen some say that it is essentially a chase movie, and not all of the people who say that, you know, some of the people who say that give it the highest rating they can. There are so many chase movies where there's not really much of a discussion about what are we going to do, and in some of them it's that it's pretty obvious. There's only really one path that makes a lot of sense. But let's see, in this they actually do talk about it, and Theo does suggest, you know, we go public with her. We tell people that, you know, here we have a pregnant woman, and, you know, that, yeah, that would lead to change. And they say the government is not going to just, you know, and I mean, ultimately, that it's one of those things. Part of the way they're probably right. If they just told the government, here we have a pregnant woman, that it wouldn't change things, at least in a good way, right away. Yeah, one of them says, you know, Key will lose, you know, they'll take the baby away from Key and give it to some upper class black woman, and that's, you know, and yeah, that probably is what would, so you know, in part they're right, but it also really tells us here we do have this, yeah, this is a group of people who do not, they have no faith left in the government. They think that the government, even in the best of circumstances, would do the wrong thing. And that really, that sets up later on. I mean, we for a while of the movie, we don't really see the fishes. We don't have any direct, you know, we only see what Theo sees. So, yeah, for a little while there, we don't see any fishes. And then when we do see them again, every last one of them is carrying a gun, and they're executing people. They're fighting British government forces. You know, I don't know, military, Homeland Security. I don't know exactly what the, you know, these forces. And yeah, it's they're such, we see them in such a different light. You know, and yeah, here early on there's the spark, you know, and later on we see the full fire. But yeah, at first it's just, you know, you can't trust the government, and then it's there's a similar thing in The Incredible Hulk. There's a character who says something about trusting the government, and yeah. Let's see. And, you know, he says to Theo, Julian said only trust you. You know, Julian knew that the other fishes couldn't be trusted and that Theo could, despite how cold Theo and Julian were towards each other until the ping pong ball game. Ping pong ball game. You know, right up to that point, they're so... And that's also, you know, after a while, yeah, and she does also kiss him fairly early on, which he doesn't really know how to take. But yeah, after a while, they used to love each other. Yeah, that was 20 years ago, and yeah, they haven't had contact since then. Last time they saw each other, they were both mourning the death of their child, who I think did die at age 8 or 9. And wait, sorry. In 2008, I'm not sure are we told? He was very, very young when it happened. Anyway, yeah, still, they used to love each other, and so and that's also something I really appreciate about the film. So some people have said that it's too, the movie is too eager to do these kind of harsh, violent scenes where characters we've cared about die. I think each of them is given enough of, like, they get to have some positive experience before they die, you know. And yeah, Julian and Theo reconnecting with the ping pong ball, and you know, at one point they kiss, and I think Key is the one who said, that's disgusting. It's just, you know, and I think Theo is the one who shoots it at Key, and it just like hits her face or something. And not like hard, but just it's funny. It's a cute moment. And then and that's also, it's one of the long takes. It's the first of the long takes. You know, we go from this happy situation to this really violent, and yeah. Now, and you know, already the news used propaganda against Julian. They claim that she died in a shootout with police. She didn't use violence against the police. We're told at, you know, the first time we meet the fishes that they haven't used violence. They haven't used bombs, at least, for, you know, a while now. So, and it wasn't the police who killed her. But if they admitted who it was, that, you know, before we realized it's fishes, you know, yeah, it's some kind of group of violent individuals, you know. If they admitted that it wasn't police, they would have to admit they don't have as much control over what happens in the country, especially when it comes to violence, as they claim to, and people might not have as much faith in the government and the police if they admitted that. Now, and Theo realizes that Luke had arranged for Julian to be shot, and that he's going to kill Theo, and Luke even pulls a gun on Patrick. Suddenly, he's solving all of his problems with violence. Now that Julian is gone, she's not there to stop him from doing that anymore. You know, maybe it was his idea to use bombs originally, and then you know, Julian was like, we can't do that anymore. This is unacceptable, and he went along with that for a while. You know, basically, you know, at the very end of the, near the very end of the movie, one of the last things Miriam says is that Julian was the only fish who had actually talked to the human project. That might very well be why Luke didn't kill her. You know, if he's going to pull a gun on Patrick, what's to stop him from pulling one on Julian? You know, and I also really appreciate, you know, Luke is the one who meets, you know, yeah, when, you know, first they have Theo in that little room, and then, you know, Theo has to talk to one of the, you know, a fish contact, and it's Luke, and, you know, it's like, and, you know, for more money, we can, you know, and Luke is like, Julian trusts you, or something like that, and you kind of get the sense that, you know, part of what he's saying is, and I sure don't. You know, no one but Julian does. Oops, I didn't bounce the camera. And then the car they stole starts to break down. Just, yeah. And so some of this film is so freaking tense that it's just, like, it's straining to watch. But, you know, not, you don't regret having watched the movie, but you do need to kind of, you know, calm back down afterwards. But yeah. And Theo again opens a car door, you know, into the body of, like, hitting his would-be attacker with it to knock them down. It's, you know, it becomes kind of a signature move. He does it twice, and there's not really any situation where he, you know, every situation where he doesn't do it, he couldn't really have done it. He doesn't have control of the car door, and that was, yeah. Yeah, don't go to another safe house. You clearly cannot trust the fishes anymore, but Jasper, on the other hand. And, you know, for a few seconds there, we think that Jasper took the suicide pills, and then he's like, no, I mix it with bread for rats. And, you know, he was like stoned, or he's reached that age where sometimes he just kind of doze off. You know, yeah. And Miriam really latches onto the claim that Jasper saw a UFO. It's, you know, she's, yeah, she believes in things that can't necessarily be proven, and she's kind of fascinated when, you know, she doesn't necessarily believe in UFOs, but she, you know, first it's just, did he tell you when he saw a UFO? You saw a UFO? And, you know, they have a conversation, and I think Jasper leaves, and is like, did he really see a UFO? You know, just, yeah. And Key explains what it was like realizing she was pregnant, and, you know, it's what a lot of women describe realizing, you know, they didn't intend to have a child, but yeah. And I'm sure some people make really racist jokes about how, you know, oh, she's an African, so of course she doesn't care about who she sleeps with. She didn't think anybody could get pregnant, so, and it's not like there's much to hope for anyway. Yeah, a lot of people would kind of drown their sorrows in sex, you know. And that's, you know, her talking about what it was like realizing she was pregnant, and the scene where she gives birth, and the whole thing, you know, I can't do this, yes you can, and all of this, so much of it could be really stereotypical and cliche, because we've seen it a million times in Hollywood movies, in, you know, American produced shows, just so many different times, and the movie makes it work, because really you can't do without these scenes. You know, her giving birth is such an important moment in the film, and and her talking about realizing that she was pregnant, and this thing of considering suicide, and this, it's important for the character, and it's important for the bonding of her and Theo. I quite like Jasper saying we break into prison, and that's, I mean, that's also something we've seen several times by now. You know, there's, yeah, it's not really a spoiler. Kane Lynch Dead Men. Sometimes I mix up which, Dog Days is 2, Dead Men is 1, but yeah. Then there's the thing with the, Prison Break itself. Does that actually have at some point? Certainly Michael Scofield at the very start lets himself be captured, so he'll be put in prison. Anyway, we've seen it, and it still doesn't feel cliche. Jasper says that he can talk his way out of the fishes killing him. He clearly doesn't believe it. We see that once Theo is gone. But he has to make Theo believe it. Because he knows that if Theo doesn't believe it, there's a chance he'll stay, and the fishes will kill him too, and Key will be back with them. And so, yeah, he tells Theo that, and then he goes in, and I'd say he gives his wife the suicide pills. We already know, she's clearly, there's not, she seems like someone who's maybe had the equivalent of a lobotomy. And actually, when we see Jasper's plays, the camera shows this, what's it, MI5 deny torture of photojournalist, and we see a picture of her. They tortured her to the point where, yeah, I guess the word is vegetable, and yeah, but Theo was asked by Jasper to feed her, so she can swallow. Otherwise he wouldn't be able to feed her like that. He's not like indicating an IV to feed her. So, and that's all that's necessary for the pills, and he's not gonna let the fishes do anything to her. He knows that they're most likely going to kill her, and it'll be more brutal than in his way with the pills. I really love that Jasper actually offers the fishes weed. I think Luke is the one standing, and he's like, you want some, and just come on, take a drag or something like that. I love that Jasper tells Theo, find Sid, tell him he's a fascist pig. And they get there, and the gun is pointed at him, and you haven't seen Theo, you haven't seen Sid yet. You can barely see that he's in the car with the, let's see, the crap. Yeah, there's like, the windshield is partially like armored and such, so you can't really see. And the gun is trained on Theo, and he's like, "You're a fascist pig." Say that again. Jasper told me to tell you you're a fascist pig. Just, yeah, and that is like that's there are probably very few people who would say that directly to one of these, let's just go with military, who deal with the refugees. So, no one's gonna accidentally stumble on to the password. No one's actually gonna have, yeah. Fascist pig or not, Sid is definitely the British Bryan Cranston. And of course they don't tell Sid that she's pregnant. And you see the refugees on the bus, they're hungry, some are crying. And Theo is told only Julian has had contact with the Human Project, and it's basically the last time in the movie we see him really hopeless. After that point, no matter the situation, he never seems genuinely to have given up hope. Now we're still recording, yep. And her water breaks right there in the buzz, and Theo manages to convince the guy, it's pee, not water. Suddenly the guy's not so interested in contact, and Theo is like, pee, poop, smell, and the guy is like, you smell it yourself. I don't know if that is a joke, but I'm fairly certain that what Theo, I mean, okay, basically there are two, the way I see it, there are two options. Maybe he was saying, if you smell it, you will know for sure that's, and that's clearly what the guy thought. I don't know, to me it seems like what he's saying is that's why the dog is reacting. It could smell pee and poop. I don't know. Maybe it's the first. Maybe it's an entirely different option. But basically the whole thing would be, for naught if he realized there is a pregnant woman here. Then there's no coming back from that. And Theo and Key are separated, although only briefly at this point. And they find Marika. And I think I've already said basically what I had to say about the birth scene itself. I do appreciate, again, we've seen it before, but I do appreciate the joke afterwards, like, that wasn't so tough, maybe not for you. And he pours liquor over his hands for, I mean, it's not super good that the baby touches liquor immediately, but the kinds of germs and such that that it might come into contact with if he didn't are worse. Sid sure likes to refer to himself in the third person. And Marika's dog is so excited about the baby, so Sid realizes there's something, and it's like, yeah, it's curious, and it can tell it there's something here that wasn't there before. So yeah, dogs are excitable. And Marika, am I pronouncing? I think that's how they pronounce it in the movie. The Romani. I quite like how Sid is like, you gotta talk to Marika. And then he says that I'm not gonna use the. Basically, he says, oh, she's Arab, she's Romani. I don't know, because he doesn't care. Because to him, they're all the same. There's no yeah. He sees a refugee and he hates them immediately, and he doesn't care what country they're from. He doesn't care the awful circumstances they escaped to get to Britain. He's like, you shouldn't be here. If nothing else, you make my job harder. If only there weren't so many refugees. Now. But yeah, Marika, the Romani, she so badly wants to help Key when she realizes about the baby. She was nice, she was giving up to that point, but when she sees the baby, and it's so transformative. It's also when Theo realizes that Key is pregnant, and Luke is actually upset that she reveals it, because he knows that's going to make Theo so much more determined. Now we got to deal with this guy. He was like, oh, can I just get a ride back to London? I really love, Marika, the Romani, literally, she hits Sid over and over with, I mean, it looks like maybe a thigh bone or something, but is it from a human? I don't know, it looks really big, but she just keeps hitting him with that. It just, yeah, she's not shown any propensity for violence before that point at all. But she knows that that's what she keeps saying, she keeps pointing to Sid and saying, danger, danger. You can't, yeah. Now, let's see. Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead. You can probably sense that I'm doing something off camera. My wrists continue to give trouble, and there's this cream for me to apply on my arms that's supposed to... It helps. Every little bit helps. And I love, just in general, I really love the tension of that door that they can just barely open, and Marika and you've got the baby being moved out there, and at and they manage to get out, but Sid is ready to shoot him. He put a new clip in the gun, of course, because he ran out of bullets before. And he shoots through the door, and he manages to push the door open just a little bit. And then, Theo, I think it's like a car battery or something, and just smack right to the face, and blood sprays, and we don't see Sid after that point. That hurt. And Key is like, look at that, Theo, they love my baby. The scenes in Bexhill are what stay with me the most. I sometimes forget how little screen time Bexhill actually gets. It feels like half the movie is set in Bexhill, when it's maybe half an hour, so, less than a third. Actually thinking about it, is it maybe like 20 minutes? I mean, once they're in the rowboat, it's, the mood is completely different from right before, but just the images of the refugees in the camp and the battle scenes, that's what I remember most about the movie. That's what rings, that's what I have the easiest time kind of quantifying, because that's what, I'm going to get into detail about that, but yeah, that's what these kind of, yeah, images from Iraq and images from Guantanamo and such. Now, and we start the third and final long take, and Luke is like, don't kill them until we're around the corner. That's a nice thought. He doesn't want Key to go through the rest of her life, however short it might be, in the fishes, yeah, with the fishes. He doesn't want her to have the image of, Luke, and he probably realizes that Key cares about Marika as well. For her to have the image of them being shot. But we see the soldiers attack. As the soldiers attack the fishes, we see how ill-prepared the fishes are for this fight. I don't think it's 30 seconds that pass between Luke turning the corner and the soldiers attacking, which is, of course, also why why Theo and Marika survive. They don't have time to, and Patrick wastes time by singing, was that an Irish song or something? I remember reading about it in trivia, but that was like maybe a week and a half ago, so I don't remember that much. But the IMDb trivia also notes the headline MI5 deny torture of photojournalist. I think it might be worth adding to that part that caption, that title goes with an image, and that image is of Jasper's wife. I had completely forgotten that was a character in the movie, that it wasn't that it wasn't, world building it was also actually background. Now, right, the fishes, like so many other revolutionary groups, they're a little naive. They think that they can actually take on the government when clearly that they're in no way equipped to do that. Now, let's see. And we see, the two tanks outside the building, and some fishes come out waving. Clearly they are surrendering, but they still get gunned down because that's less of a hassle for these military. Yeah. And Theo runs up through the building. Patrick gets shot, and wait, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Patrick. And he, Theo finds Luke, and Luke spots him, and he says, Julian was wrong. She thought it could be peaceful, but how can it be peaceful when they take away your dignity? And that really sums up so many fights against injustice. There's a lot that human beings can give up without fighting back that much, but dignity that's a really difficult one to justify. And everyone is stunned when they realize there's a baby, and they want to touch it. At first it's all the people inside the building, but we also see the military, and the violence stops temporarily on both sides. Evidently there are good people on both sides, but as quickly as it stopped, the fighting starts again. One person attacks, and that's all it took. And before you say, well, what are they supposed to do other than that fight? They could have made a tactical retreat instead, try to keep the child safe, but it's so ingrained, they have to keep up the violence. And I don't say that as some kind of anti-military thing, and I don't think the movie itself is anti-military, it's anti-totalitarianism. But that's what they're taught. The military training tells them that violence is the solution. Luke thinks that violence is the solution, and he gets all the fishes killed. The military think that violence is the solution, and because of that, they actually start firing weapons that close to the baby. They could have inadvertently killed the baby that clearly they do care about. And yeah, I do. It's really powerful when you see all these people who were, trying to kill each other. Suddenly they just, they reach out for the baby, and they just, yeah. And Theo and Key get into the rowboat, and we see the military bomb Bexhill. There's no way they didn't hit a number of their own men. Too little time has passed. That the military we just saw, the people around the tanks and such, they can't possibly all have gotten away safely. And communicated that they got away safely. Whatever Luke thought, whatever the various groups in Bexhill thought, they probably accomplished absolutely nothing with their violence. And that's unfortunately true of a lot of violence. It doesn't do anything other than the destruction and death it spreads. And yeah, I think that's one. And with Theo's instruction, Key manages to soothe Dylan, and Key is like, oh no, I'm bleeding, and Theo's like, no, that's me. And I mean, he's gone 2 or 3 minutes, I'd say at least, since, I mean, it was apparently Luke who shot him, at least according to Wikipedia, as far as I recall. But yeah, that's he's he held on for that long because he wanted to make sure that they made it to the tomorrow. And we see it arrive for Key and Dylan, and, you know, I've seen some people say, oh, well, we don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing that they got. We don't know if you know, if humanity survived. You probably, if maybe you turned off the movie the moment the credits started, or the moment that the screen went to black. At least I'm not actually entirely sure if the credits start before this part is over, but there is a very clear, distinct sound of a lot of children laughing. It is very clear that humanity will survive. There will be more children in the future. You know, that's not like a flashback or something. That is saying that in the future. But I mean, what did you want? Like them getting the you know, the two of them onto the ship, and like a bunch of scientists going, this is what we've been waiting for. This is excellent. We can do it, and like a bunch of exposition about what they're going to do, and just the moment that you see them reach the ship, then I would agree that the ending is doesn't show enough if we didn't see the ship. If it ended with the two of them in the rowboat and Theo lying there dying, and then it went to black. But we see the ship. It's clearly the right ship. There's, yeah. Now, the movie is 99 minutes without counting the end credits, and it's 104.5 width. And that brings us to... notes taken before rewatching. Now, I read the book before watching it this time, and it's the first time that I read the book, and I will be spoiling some of the book as well. And yeah, I've watched the movie a number of times over the years, but yeah, this is the first time I've read the book, and I haven't watched anything else that adapts the work of P.D. James. Now, Alfonso Cuarón did not read the book, but only the script. You know, he felt that it might ruin things if he did read the book, or at least he didn't read it before making. I don't know if he's read it since then. And the book is great, but I am so glad that they changed a lot, because maybe it would have made a good movie if they did a more direct adaptation. But if the movie is more or less as it is now, but a bunch of the details are closer to the book than they are to the movie, I would have hated this movie. I'm sorry. That would have been so wrong. But yeah, you know, this is very much a movie by Alfonso Cuarón, and the book does not really suit his. It's got a great concept, but the book, you know, if you just read it, it's not at all like a movie by him. Now, you know, a bunch of stuff that's in the movie is there in the book. You know, you've got the death of the youngest person, but in the book, no one looks for the new youngest, and the news barely mention his death. That's the exact opposite. You know, here in the movie, it's like it's the top news story, and they immediately find the next person who's the youngest. And I get, in the book, it's kind of this thing of, well, why would we bother finding the next youngest person? You know, they're going to die, there's no hope anyway. Where in the movie, it's kind of, it's the one thing people hang on to. You know, it is like, if you imagine the real world, if suddenly, if we arrived at a situation where we could not have children, then yeah, people would obsess over the youngest people, you know, and try to hold on to that, because that is the only way we have a future. Now, you know, I mean, basically the one thing that, you know, the movie never really touches upon something like cloning, which could, you know, I'm not sure. And when she wrote the book in 1991, I'm not sure people would have really thought, you know, couldn't we just clone people? But in 2007, the idea that we could, in the future, clone people, and that would, you know, that would at least be something we could do, you know, but the movie doesn't tell us that much, so it's entirely possible that cloning has been invented in the world of the movie, but it's very, it's resource intensive. Is that the word? It costs a lot of time, money, and like maybe some kind of natural resource that's very hard to come by. You know, clearly nature has taken a serious hit in the world of the movie as well. So, you know, something like that. I don't think it's a plot hole, is what I'm getting at. And, you know, in both movie and book, the UK is a dictatorship, but in the book, there's a lot of detail, where in the movie, we're given some detail, and then, you know, yeah, a bunch of it is visual, rather than exposition or the like. Yeah, it's very, very, and again, if the movie, yeah, excuse me, and in both, they can't find the cure, and in the book, there's, excuse me, a bunch of details about how they tried. In the movie, I mean, Miriam talks about how she found out that, you know, this, you know, I talked to various other, you know, what's it called, midwives, and they all said, oh, no pregnancies, you know, no one's made appointments, and it's, yeah, you know, we don't really need to be told, because we get bogged down in detail, and that's exactly what Cuarón wants to avoid, you know, because if the movie starts telling you, well, you know, we tried this and we tried this, there are going to be people in the audience who are like, but did you try this? And then you're focusing on that, and then you're just sitting there waiting to, are they going to try that? Because I think it would work. And that's not the point. Yeah. But, you know, of course, it's a book, so of course it's going to have more detail, but yeah. And it's not, I don't have some kind of, you know, I am not a proud non-reader of books. I used to read a lot. I don't as much anymore, but yeah, books are one of my favorite mediums. Some of my best medium stories are books. But I do think that movies often move a lot, you know, have there's more of a smooth pace if you don't, you know, have these exposition dumps and such. But yeah, you know, like I said, a lot of the overall things are there, you know, are the same in the book and the movie, but the detail is very different. Yeah. And, you know, in the book, there's this thing of, like, you know, there's this kind of almost Cold War style spying, and you've got different countries trying to find a cure without working together, and that that's a good point. That's probably something that would happen, and, you know, there's nothing like in the movie. I mean, as far as we know, Britain is the one place that's still okay. You know, we see images from a lot of different, you know, major cities, capitals, I guess, around the world. Now, and in the book, Theo's cousin is the actual dictator, not just someone with power. And the dictator, I mean, we don't even know if it's a single person in the movie or if it's like a group of people. You know, some dictatorships are run by a small group of people, but, you know, there's often like one guy at the very top. But nevertheless, in the book, you actually get to know this guy. You know, there's stories about how he and Theo interacted when they were like teenagers and such. But yeah, and Theo in the book is middle-aged, but also unhappy, doesn't love anyone, and maybe never did. Now, this is the first thing. This I wrote, I don't know, a year ago, I guess, when I first decided to do a video on this movie, and originally I was gonna postpone it, and I eventually moved it up. Maybe it hasn't been a year, whatever. The moment that Theo is alone with Julianne, they revert to the way they were as a couple, and the first thing they argue about is the one that tore them apart. You know, you've got such big things going on, and they devolve into a loud argument about something personal that doesn't currently have relevance to what they're doing. It's not as if, say, he's doubting a strategic decision of hers, and here I also noted that, you know, Theo gets them through a lot of close calls, but sometimes he's more lucky than good at improvising. But yeah, a lot of time he's good at improvising, but he also definitely gets lucky, which of course does not lead to pregnancy. There's yeah, you know, it's not like he's saying, I don't think you care enough about children to care about Key's pregnancy or something. No, they're talking about that, you know, and it's, you know, he's like, look at me, and she's like, it's hard for me to look at you, he had your eyes. And then I forget if there's more lines between that and this, but then he says, I never understood how you got over it so quickly. And she's like, how could you possibly think I got over it? No one ever gets over something like that. And it's just, they grieve in different ways. Everybody grieves in different ways. But yeah, to him, he still thinks 20 years later, he's still holding on to the idea that she got over it, and he's like, I can't believe you just. It's very psychologically realistic about, you know, couples. Now, I believe I have watched Y Tu Mama Tambien, and that's terrible Spanish pronunciation, and my Spanish teacher is cringing, probably even without watching this video, just by, like, you know, automatically. But she did when I, you know, during the oral exam as well, so she's used to it by now. If I did watch it, it was years ago, I don't really remember it. I did watch the Great Expectations movie that he directed. I don't think it really showcases his talent. And other than that, I haven't watched that much of this director's work. You know, Gravity intrigued me, but I watched 20 seconds of the trailer and felt sick to my stomach. That never happens to me. But yeah, I figured I would never be able to go through the entire movie, especially in the cinema, especially in IMAX. So yeah, I'm sorry, I'll probably never watch that movie, but I have a ton of respect for the cinematography of it. It just, yeah. Now, as far as the people who wrote the script for this go, I've watched Iron Man, which I love, Cowboys and Aliens, which I still don't think is all that bad. Considering that this movie has 5 credited writers and uncredited contributions by Clive Owen, this has a very sharp focus and isn't at all the mess that is usually the case with so many writers. And, you know, the movie has great commentary on the treatment of ethnic minorities, immigrants, and the like. You know, they're not being treated humanely. They're, you know, being treated somewhat like livestock or slaves. Many are behind bars, even in cages. You know, you've got fences separating them from British people, and obviously part of the explanation is that the government is afraid there are terrorists among them, and it's having trouble adjusting to how many there are coming in. But they're all being treated as if they are criminals. You know, it's clear that they're crossing the border because their own country is no longer safe. You know, you've got the news report saying Britain is the only country that hasn't fallen. And many of these people probably aren't even, you know, I could imagine a lot of the people aren't even immigrants as such, but they, you know, they were born in the UK, but their parents come from a country that the British government is now afraid of. You know, they've got the same skin color, maybe even religion of people committing terrorist attacks, and that's enough. And some of the news headlines confirm that Britain's government is doing totalitarian things, including surveillance of mosques, torturing the British citizens, including a reporter. And it's been more than 10 years since the movie came out, and we're still recording. We are not in 2027 yet, and who knows, depending on Trump's large nuclear button, which works, it's possible we won't get to 2027, which is when the film was set. But some of the horrible treatment of immigrants has come true. Countries are refusing to take in immigrants despite the fact that many of these immigrants can no longer stay where they used to live, some due to violence or instability, some due to climate change. In America, immigrants who have not yet been proven to do anything illegal other than crossing the border, which once again is a matter of life and death for a number of them, have been put in camps. In this film, I don't think we ever see I guess it wouldn't be child, but teenager, someone in their 20s or something, behind a fence when, for about 2 months recently in America, children, even toddlers, were separated from their parents. Yeah, I guess maybe that's why we don't see it in the movie, because there are no toddlers, and yeah. Now, but yeah, I don't even know if that was necessarily something the movie that they figured would come. I mean, there are a lot of other things in the movie that haven't happened, and certainly, we have far bigger problems from. One second. Due to climate change than due to any infertility, or we're still in a situation where yeah, overpopulation is but the immigration and the way immigrants are treated, and the militarization of, maybe not Britain as much, but certainly American police now. And yeah, and we see, when no one can procreate, different groups come up with different explanations for why, different solutions, and yeah. And we've got terrorist attacks. And I think it's compelling that the movie is about keeping the pregnant woman away from a lot of groups and people that you might expect would help. The only ones they consider safe for her are the scientists on the ship. They don't trust the government. At least in theory, they're supposed to help people, support people. That's why you have a government rather than just a bunch of roving gangs. You establish a government with the purpose of making sure that the citizens of that government can get by. And obviously, in a lot of dictatorial governments, that's not the case, but they at least pretend to, or they just make stupid mistakes that, a lot of times when dictatorial governments end up killing a lot of their own, causing a lot of damage, getting their own people killed, it's because they had stupid ideas. Oh, let's kill all the birds. Let's suddenly transition from, between farming and like industrialism, or just these, these ideas that are completely out of step with reality. And you see that they don't trust major religious groups. Some of those have clearly gone fanatical, specifically because no new children are being born. And, certainly it's one major reason, at least, but probably the treatment of refugees is also a big, I appreciate that so much of the world building is done through visuals. You don't have long political speeches. You don't see someone try to explain how we got here. That the world's women are infertile, that Britain is the only country still hanging on, and that's led to a very cruel situation concerning immigrants, whether refugees or not, in the UK. I have this. I'm personally of the opinion that for the vast majority of movies, you should watch at least one trailer pretty much right before watching it, and that probably shouldn't be the first time you watch that trailer either. So I did that with this, And in the trailer, it's voiceover by Clive Owen rather than, in the movie, it is this news broadcast, which they couldn't have made to work in the trailer. They recorded that specifically for the trailer. There's no way in the movie, there's no place in the movie that would have fit in. They knew that they would have to have some kind of exposition. Yeah, now. And the movie is very saddening, feels very close to today's world, and the long takes make for such palpably realistic action scenes. While intellectually you might understand that you are not actually watching documentary footage of people dying, it still feels completely real. And they're exciting and intense, and like with Christopher Nolan's movies, the movie pushes it exactly as far as it could possibly go without becoming too much for us. And from here on out, a bunch of this is, some is from Wikipedia, a lot of it is from reviews, both professional and user reviews. And I'm going to read aloud the stuff I think is especially noteworthy, and I'll comment on some. Let's see. Yeah, as one of the only places that haven't fallen, the UK must deal with millions of illegal immigrants trying to take refuge within their country. This prompts the UK to drop into a militarized police state where violence and death are commonplace. And interestingly enough, what I enjoyed most about this movie was the atmosphere. The world in Children of Men is so disquieting and so scary, until the art directors really took an extensive amount of time to make this setting look as dreary as it's supposed to be. The setting's bleakness is accentuated with really appropriate lighting. Now, however, the cinematography also offers some really beautiful shots of the ravaged UK, and I think it's about... Now, at the start of the movie, oh, yeah, I think I'm still... At the start of the movie, when the bomb goes off in the coffee shop, Clive Owen was just inside, more than most other movies I've watched, that really makes the danger and chaos feel so close that it might hit you. And it's a brilliant decision to film it in one take. And yeah, and then stuff I did say earlier. And we are still recording. Let's see. I think I'm gonna go ahead. Let's see. The movie imagines a world drained of hope and defined by terror, in which bombs regularly explode in cafes crowded with men and women on their way to work. And excuse me, just gonna have to do this. There we go. Now, much like the best genre films of Hollywood history, Children of Men doesn't announce its themes from a bully pulpit with a megaphone in hand and Oscar in mind, but through the beauty of its form. And let's see. Theo goes to work and then he says, "Baby Diego's death bothered me more than I thought I would have. Can I work from home for the rest of the day?" But he does tell Jasper, "I was almost blown up." And that's... I can imagine that he probably didn't particularly feel like working before that either. But and that's also I don't know if you want to call it funny or not, but he tells his boss, "Can I work from home for the rest of the day?" And smash cut, and he's with Jasper. Clearly not working. So yeah, and not long after we meet Jasper, we realize that he, you know, he enjoys weed. So it's not like there is no way Theo is doing work in this situation. But he doesn't tell his boss, "I was almost killed by a bomb." Maybe it wouldn't even get him, a day, was work from home day. Maybe he doesn't want his boss to, maybe he doesn't want to let his boss in on something that, I mean, it's scary. It's not something that, and a lot of people who experience things like that don't want to talk to everybody about it. Now, and I also really appreciate, not only the explosion, but this screaming woman holding her severed arm. Yeah. Again, we've seen explosions in so many Hollywood movies, but not, there are a lot of them that don't make it as real. But yeah, she survived, but that's, yeah. Now, let's see. The action is swift, ferocious, spectacularly choreographed, with bodies careening wildly amid a fusillade of bullets and flying glass. I think I meant to look that word up. Now, yeah, what stays with us, what lingers isn't the technical virtuosity, it's that after the car screeches off, Mr. Guaron's camera quietly lingers behind to show us two dead policemen, murdered in the name of an ideal and left like roadkill. He forces us to look at the unspeakable, and in doing so, opens up a window onto the film's moral landscape. And yeah. Let's see. Yeah, and most of the people doing the preaching turn out to be dreadfully, catastrophically misguided. Everyone else seems to be holding on. And it says, Jasper bides his time with laughter and a lot of homegrown weed while listening to Beatles covers and rap. And yeah. And Theo's wealthy cousin Nigel is stashing away masterpieces like Michelangelo's David for safekeeping in his private museum in Rome. While Rome, New York, and probably Guernica burn, can only smile as they swill another glass of wine. He can always smile, yeah. Now, let's see. Let's see. There was a thing that I wanted to say. Maybe I'll remember it later. I do recommend, read the reviews by yourself. I used to try to read out all the best reviews. I don't do that anymore. I just, I want to make sure I cover the most compelling stuff that I feel I can at all speak to. But read these reviews yourself also, if you've got time and interest. Now, the let's see, yeah, Key did not appear in the book, and if I recall, yeah, I'm fairly certain the pregnant woman in the book is named Helena, and is basically the, you know, there's a separate Julianne character in the book, and the two characters were merged into the Julianne character in the movie. In the book, Helena is the ex-wife, and she's the one who's pregnant, which is, of course, also, that means that Theo has a second chance with, you know, it's not his child, but a child of Helena's, you know, but I really appreciate that they changed it to an African woman, you know. She did not appear in the book, and was written into the film based on Cuarón's interest in the recent single-origin hypothesis of human origins and the status of dispossessed people. And yeah, the fact that this child will be the child of an African woman has to do with the fact that humanity started in Africa. We're putting the future of humanity in the hands of the dispossessed and creating a new humanity to spring out of that. The movie would lose so much if she was not African. Yeah. Now, this is from Wikipedia under themes, hope and faith. Let's see, let's see. In the movie, it's switches the infertility from male to female, but never explains its cause. Environmental destruction and divine punishment are considered. Now, this unanswered question and others in the film have been attributed to Cuarón's dislike for expository film. There's a kind of cinema I detest, which is a cinema that is about exposition and explanations. It's become now what I call a medium for lazy readers, which, yeah. Cinema is a hostage of narrative, and I'm very good at narrative as a hostage of cinema. Now, let's see. Cuarón's disdain for backstory and exposition led him to use the concept of female infertility as a metaphor for the fading sense of hope. And the almost mythical human project is turned into a metaphor for the possibility of the evolution of the human spirit, the evolution of human understanding. Without dictating how the audiences should feel by the end of the film, Cuarón encourages viewers to come to their own conclusions of the sense of hope depicted in the final scenes. We wanted the end to be a glimpse of the possibility for hope, for the audience to invest their own sense of hope into that ending. So if you're a hopeful person, you'll see a lot of hope. If you're a bleak person, you'll see a complete hopelessness at the end. And I don't know, I guess you could say that maybe he said that before the decision to put the laughter of children over the very, very ending, you know, the black screen and such. I don't know. Or maybe he's saying that, well, maybe it'll only be temporary, maybe it will still, which I can definitely see people watching this film and being like, well, it won't last, it'll still be, yeah. I'll get into what I feel about it a little later when I talk about the scientific my reading of what will be what'll happen after the ending of the movie. Now, and yeah, it points out that it's a documentary newsreel style, and there's a film critic who notes that the film makes a potent case against the anti-immigrant sentiment prevalent in modern societies like the United Kingdom and the United States. And another described the film as a complex meditation on the politics of today. And I would have to agree. And let's see. Yeah, and for all certain other critics, the structural support and impetus for the contemporary references rests upon the visual nature of the film's exposition, occurring in the form of imagery as opposed to conventional dialogue. Visually, the refugee camps in the film intentionally evoke the Abu Ghraib prison, the Guantanamo Bay detention camp, and the maze. And other popular images appear, such as a sign over the refugee camp reading Homeland Security. The similarity between the hellish cinema verite stylized battle scenes of film and current news and documentary coverage of the Iraq War is noted by film critic Manola Dargis, I don't know, describing Cuarón's fictional landscapes as war zones of extraordinary plausibility. In the film, refugees are hunted down like cockroaches, rounded up and put into cages and camps, even shot. And leading film critics like Chris Smith and Chloe Pugh to observe symbolic overtones and images of the Holocaust. This is reinforced in the scene where an elderly refugee woman speaking German is seen detained in a cage, and in the scene where British Homeland Security strips and beats illegal immigrants. A song by the Libertines, Arbeit macht frei, plays in the background. The visual allusions to the Nazi roundups are unnerving, writes Richard A. Blake. It shows that what people can become when the government orchestrates their fears for its own advantage. And let's see. And I also recommend you read Wikipedia on your own for this. And let's see. And as others know, in some ways, mostly a chase movie, so it's amazing it fits in so much commentary. I disagree with but get if some feel that the movie is manipulative, preachy, pretentious, trying too hard, heavy-handed. And let's see. Now, and yeah, I don't think that everybody who dislikes it, quote-unquote, doesn't get it. You know, there are people who do understand the movie, but who still dislike it, and yeah. But I do think that a lot of the people who write user reviews that are very negative of the movie, they put in stuff that shows that they did not get it, and I mean, there's, you know, points for honesty, but if you're trying to make the case that, you know, and I'm not, you know, some people wanted an action movie, and, you know, I think I saw someone point out that, I mean, the cover, yeah, you know, on the cover you have, like, helicopters, and I think you see at least one of the tanks, and some guys with guns, you know, military people and such. Yeah, and like, you know, you've got dramatically, you have Clive Owen and Julianne Moore's face in this, you know, there's this round hole in, like, excuse me, in glass, so yeah, it kind of does make it seem like it might be an action movie. And yeah, I think the marketing made some mistakes there. And I think an argument could be made that at least part of the trailer also makes it seem like more of an action movie than it is. But yeah, it's just not. And I don't think, you know, I've made reviews where I was like, I thought this movie would be this, and it was that. And that is frustrating to me, and I probably gave it a negative review even when it didn't deserve it. I don't think that's, you know, that can happen. That doesn't mean that they could never, yeah. And this one guy says, did I note what he voted? Nope, I did not note what he voted. What? Oh, screw you. Not you, you. Okay, let's see. That's really annoying. There we go. Now, yeah, there's this one guy who says, read the book, then rate the movie. This adaptation is utter garbage. Only the general plot survives. Yeah, that is true. I don't think the movie's garbage, but if what you wanted was a close adaptation of the book, which, I don't know, maybe that would, if someone someday makes a more direct adaptation of the book, I will watch it, and I will give my fair assessment, but I'm glad that this movie isn't. I really, if Cuarón attempted to direct a movie that was a very direct adaptation, he would be hamstrung, and it would be, yeah, it would be bad for everyone. But and then the critic goes on to say, I bet the author of the book did not approve of this drivel. She did apparently like it, according to IMDb trivia. But yeah, approve and ending up liking it is of course not the same thing. But yeah, and I'm sorry, I am on the side who says that when you make, it sucks, it can really hurt, but when you put creative expression of yours out there, people are going to interpret it and use it in ways that you did not intend. And I'm sorry, but if you don't want that to happen, then never share your creative expression. It is a, it's the lesser of two evils. I used to write, and I know how frustrating it can be to not share it with other people, but I felt people are gonna, some people are gonna read into this stuff that I didn't mean, and it's gonna, and I don't want that. So I ended up keeping, I did share some, but at the end of the day, I think that's the choice you have to make, and I don't think it's not. I don't think that other people are responsible for not changing what you wrote. There's that, Alan Moore, although he did eventually change his mind, he referred to, like, was the guy who wrote the book that was adapted into The Big Sleep, maybe? I think it's like that. And he said, oh, how can you, doesn't it hurt that people, what people did to your book? And he would, like, put his arm around, them and direct, guide them over to his bookshelf, and he'd say, see, my book, it's right there, it's safe, no one did anything to it, and for a while that was what Alan Moore thought, and I forget if it was From Hell or V for Vendetta, but one of those movies, it was like, nope, I've changed my mind, and you are not putting my name on more of these adaptations, and I'm not going to watch it. Okay, just before, this is starting to turn into a tangent, but I just have to quote. When Zack Snyder was once asked, what do you, what, I don't know exactly the question, but his answer was basically, will Alan Moore, how will Alan Moore feel about this? And he's like, oh, I mean, I'm sure one day in London he'll pop in the DVD and sit down and watch it and be like, oh, that wasn't that bad. And Moore was like, I forget exactly what he said something that made it pretty clear that, no, I'm not going to sit down in London. And it's like, I don't live in London, dude. Is and that, which is not a huge, but then he says, I'm never going to watch this fucking thing, which is, yeah. Did I already mention that they were talking about Watchmen? They were talking about Watchmen. And another, I love Alan Moore. I love his books, and I do think some of the movies based on them are, I do think there's a lot of value to Watchmen, the movie adaptation, even if it is not as such. There are definitely things about it that could be better. But I love his writings, and I love some of the things he said. I think, yeah, when 300, the movie, came out, I think, as far as I remember, he didn't watch it, but he said, I didn't watch it, but as far as I understand, the movie goes even further in the wrong directions that the book went with, homophobia and xenophobia and such, and then I forget if it's the same quote or if it's some other, but he said, I think it was specifically the Spartans criticizing the Athenians for being boy lovers. I mean, read a book, Frank. I can't not love the arrogance and dismissiveness of how he yeah, I'm sorry, I love that. And yeah, some of the time Frank Miller really does need to read a book, and I do still think that there's some, I can't not love Sin City. I'm sorry. Both movies and the have I by now read every single Sin City book? I think I have. If I recall, I have. Some of them more than once. Now, let's see. Yeah, this one guy gave it a 1 out of 10, and he said, apart from other variables, for me the movie is completely ruined by the ill-conceived script featuring, among other abominable scenes, a particular one in which is described how the midwife came to notice the sudden stop of newly born children in the world. Then 18 years ago, which is now, trying to remember it correctly, I think she stated that she noticed a rapid decline in new births in her area, and that her colleagues, over a period of weeks. Seriously, people who in their right minds wrote this prescriptive script, if this were to happen now, you wouldn't be hearing it from a coworker nor your neighbor. It would be all over the news 24/7, the internet, and God knows what else. The movie's way is more personal, hence they chose it, though it was less realistic. And I'm going to get more into this. Not everything in the movie is realistic. I mean, you do realize that some parts of the movie are specifically going for us, symbolic, like there's religious, not all of it is supposed to be realistic. I think there's this misconception that movies are supposed to be realistic. Movies trick the eye and the mind into thinking that what we're seeing is real, and that makes a lot of people think that, well, then it should be as realistic. They don't necessarily think of it as that, but it makes us think. It's like if a friend of yours was telling you a story and suddenly he said something that's completely absurd, you would be like, oh, come on. And that's kind of it's the, oh, come on, that wouldn't happen. When people see something in a movie, there are definitely movies that are trying to be 100% realistic and that aren't. And there I do think, if it's a failure of the film, it's a failure of the film. But a lot of movies are not trying to be realistic. And people see the documentary style stuff in this movie, and on account of that think, well, again, not necessarily, possibly subconsciously, then the movie must be completely realistic. It must be supposed to be completely realistic. It's not. It's super not. There's a bunch of stuff in it that is not. Yeah. Now that was the way you're free to think that that's a bad decision, but it was a decision. It wasn't a mistake. Or you're free to think it was, but it wasn't something that happened without them thinking carefully about it. It was something they decided to do. You can think that it was wrong, it was the wrong decision, but it's not. Movies, the only movie I've watched by or is it just Bowl, is the first House of the Dead movie. That movie and the video reviews I've seen of other of his movies have convinced me that there's no reason for me to watch any of his other movies, because I don't hate myself. That movie is terrible, and it is genuinely, they make so many mistakes in. One of the most obvious is that every so often, when they cut from like a scene to the next, or from one shot to the next, they will have as a transition footage of gameplay. I don't know who thought that was a good idea, or why, or even if anybody did think, but it's a terrible idea. It completely takes you out of the movie, and a bunch of the movie is trying to build this situation where, you've got these kids on this, you know, and there are a bunch of zombies around, and it's dangerous and such. And then suddenly you have this video game footage. They didn't recreate stuff the way it looks in them. Did they at any point? I don't think, but I've only watched it once, and it was a long time ago, and it was a terrible movie, so I don't remember that much. But they didn't just do that. They actually took footage from the game. No one's going to look at that footage and think it's not from a video game. That was a terrible decision. I worry I sometimes come off as an apologist. If it's a bad decision, it's a bad decision. But a lot of these movies, people seem to think that something is a bad decision when, I'm sorry, they maybe just didn't think of why they made that decision. And yeah, sometimes you can, something can come off as a bad decision if you don't realize why the decision. Yeah. Now, let's see. Yeah, just briefly. Less so about entertainment. Children of Men is a social commentary. Pro-lifers will see it from their point of view just as much as environmentalists and the anti-war crowd will from theirs. It could be seen as an amalgamation of all these views, focusing on an overarching theme of a lack of respect for life in the modern times we live. And I think that is very true. That's maybe part of why, because they don't really explain things, and we see visually, you know, these various things. So yeah, it is, yeah, yeah, you could see it as an amalgamation. You could see it as one of these, and that I think is part of the strength of the movie. And if you had a character, you know, if you had a scientist just say, okay, this is what happened, this is what's gonna happen, then you don't have that. Then you can't, you know, freely interpret it with this much freedom. Now, let's see. Yeah, I'm not even going to read that aloud. Some of these reviews. Sorry. This is where I get into yes. Science is, I guess, what I'm going to call it for now. Maybe I'll think of something else when I originally wasn't going to make this its own, but I do think that this is a place that might be a good place to separate, because this is where I am going to be talking. I forget what comes after these notes, but I'm pretty sure something does. But this is where I'm going to talk about the science. Yeah, I'm just going to start reading my notes. Some people seem to, honestly, rather than in bad faith, not understand how getting a single pregnant girl to scientists who are working to cure infertility would help. So let's get scientific. Here's how I see it. The scientists already, have women who are currently infertile. If they didn't, how could they possibly test if they can restore fertility? So they, by the end of the movie, have both women who are infertile and one who is fertile and who was recently pregnant. There we go. So they can now look at differences between the two groups. It's possible that there's some immunization that Key has that can be granted to the others. In that case, it's about being able to create that, then mass producing it, and getting it to people all over the world. It's also possible that it is simply impossible to render the infertile woman fertile. In that case, is it fertile? Fertile? Well, in that case, they have to find out if Key can get pregnant again, and once she's of age, her daughter Dylan, And if so, she or they will have to become pregnant and give birth as many times as is safe and ethical. Obviously, if it's not possible to render the majority of women fertile again, the children that come out of this will have to be protected so that no one, in an outburst of emotion in response to seeing someone having been born recently, hurt them, likely accidentally. It's possible that they would have to live for a while in sterile, hospital-like conditions, kept safe from possible fertility-harming bacteria, pollution, flu, etc. Since the scientists may not, still by that point, not know what caused the infertility, otherwise they could be kept safe similar to how countries' leaders are kept safe, personal security forces, walls, perimeters, etc. Of course, the world would not just immediately turn around and become safe for people. It would be a process. It would have to start with Britain, since they have a government, even if it's fascist. There might even be violence between fascist forces and pro-democratic groups. But if regular people find out that new children can be born, the majority of them would want Britain to return to being a democracy. And I personally choose to believe that it will go in the direction of Gandhi's nonviolent protest, rather than, say, that of Sophie Scholl and others under Nazi rule. Excuse me. I just forgot to breathe. I do not believe that they would slaughter massive groups of regular people, since ultimately they are not against their own people, they're against immigrants. And the immigration could become properly organized once it was clear to the people of the world that children could be born again. Gradually, Britain could help the different countries of the world rebuild, similar to the Marshall Plan. Again, I realize that this would take time, might have setbacks along the way, maybe take over a century, but given that the central problem in the world that this movie creates, the world that this movie creates, is infertility, not currently in the real world. Once that was solved, you could gradually rebuild. Given that we today face a problem from climate change, in the real world, we're probably facing a much harder process. Especially because a lot of stupid people refuse to accept that things need to change so that we can minimize, so that we can do to what we can to lessen the consequences and, yeah, prepare for the consequences. Now, let's see. Let's see. Cuarón makes it believable in that there are so many different reactions to the situation in which humanity finds itself 18 years after the last child is born. Those who turn to self-flagellating religious cults, the deniers, those who just don't think about it, the government and big companies who continue on through sheer force of momentum, the angry rebels, the solution seekers, the hopelessly depressed who turn to quiet suicide. All of this is presented almost as background in flashes of imagery or brief sequences. The reactions to the death of baby Diego in the opening scene took me right back to September 11th, the numb shock that overtook us all that day. There was so much packed into this movie that I intend to see it again unencumbered by the anxiety of what happens next. I will also eagerly await Cuarón's next film. My respect for him has grown with each of his movies. I expect even greater works from him in the, hopefully not this bleak, future. And as others know, make sure to watch the background, and as I've already somewhat said, not everything here is realistic. It's not meant to be. It's part fable and allegory. Now, let's see. Yeah, this reviewer points out that part of the difference between the book and the movie is a telling comment on our post-9/11 world. And that's very true. You cannot... Yeah, the world is a very different place. The world has been a very different place since 9/11 than it was before it, and it just does not make that much sense to... And maybe that's also part of why P.D. James was ultimately liked the movie, and that's also, you can't keep things like this static. If the movie had been made before 9/11, maybe it would have been a lot closer to the book, but today it just... whereas the novel depicts a benevolent but ineffectual government helping its aging citizens come to terms with the extinction of their species, the movie shows a grim and fiercely defensive government locking down the last surviving bastion of civilization. And the end results of both are the same, a semi-hopeful yet resigned plunge into the inevitable. And the image from the movie that continues to haunt me is one of a mushroom cloud over Manhattan that appears in a montage show on a video screen while Theo rides the bus. It's a grimly familiar sight that grips me with a deep chill. Now, and from another review, this guy gave it an 8 out of 10. Theo sees, but he doesn't see, the people in cages that plethorically mar the urban landscape of a police state England. Or does he? It's hard to tell if Theo's neutral countenance is one of arctic indifference or a mask that blankets his disgust towards Europe's callous attitude towards foreigners. On one hand, Theo befriends Jasper, a hippie of advanced age, who wouldn't want to hang out with an advocate for ultra-conservative politics. But then there's a scene strongly reminiscent of Vic Morrow's episode in The Twilight Zone, the movie, where Clive finds himself in the other man's shoes, on a bus en route to an uncertain future in which death or deportation are the only two choices. Morrow's character was a bigot. Then Theo meets Key and discovers the bun. Is there a change in attitude towards the expectant mother? Up to this point in the story, by all appearances, Theo lived in a segregated existence. And Children of Men ends abruptly with Key in limbo, so we're left wondering what will happen to the young woman. And see, that is, I think, the best way to put it, because that is the thing. We don't ultimately know how ethical this group of scientists is, and you can hope that they're very ethical, but maybe they see, maybe they don't see a person who can become pregnant so much as a baby machine and just keep her constantly pregnant until, yeah, so, but, I'd say it's pretty clear from the laughter of the children, there will definitely be more children in the future of the world that this movie creates. Now, yeah, this will anger some people who've been anesthetized by too many closed endings. The rest of us, however, will leave the theater happy, because we get to determine what holds in the future for all mankind. Now, let's see. And there are criticisms I have heard from friends. The first is the film doesn't explain why this infertility epidemic arose. My opinion on this is that it reflects real life. No one knows how AIDS originated, for instance. The second criticism is the low-key ending, which I personally love. I love the ambiguity of this ending, which imbues the nature of sacrifice, and your own pessimism or optimism will determine whether that was in vain. And let's see. Yeah, I think I might have considered quoting the entire, yeah, just, it's on the IMDb quotes page and in the movie. The exchange, the joke that, what the heck was that? That Theo tells, that's the first time Theo says anything at all about the human project, but, one sec, oh, for the, is there such a thing as divorcing your laptop's mouse? Because I think that's what I possibly need. Jasper mentions the human project. That's part of the joke. Set up for the joke. And Theo scoffs and says, human project, why do people believe this crap? Even if these people existed with these facilities in these secret locations, fuck me, that's strong. Even if they discovered the cure for infertility, doesn't matter. Too late, world went to shit. Know what? It was too late before the infertility thing happened, for fuck's sake. And that, that's how he thinks about it at that time. But at the end of the movie, Theo has a ton of faith in the human project. Some people say there's no character development. That's another example of character development. I think I did include more examples further down in this note. But yeah, And at first, Theo and Key can't stand each other. Near the end, they care a lot about each other. And Julie and Theo reconnect over their time together. Over the time together they spend in the movie, screen time. Yeah, literally at first, Theo, they tell Theo, so this is the woman that you're transporting, and he's looking at her, and she's like, what the fuck are you staring at? Pleasure's all mine, apparently, and just, yeah. And let's hypothetically, say that at the end of the movie, Theo still had no faith in the human project. Why does he put in so much effort to get Key to the boat? Why does he reassure her the boat will come back? It's not, and that's again, if you wanted to, you could you could have changed that. It could have been that they sail and the boat is there waiting for them, but instead it's that too late, the boat has already left, and just, the movie keeps putting them in these hopeless situations, and they still just barely make it, which again, that's what the movie, if the movie had, if the movie was completely hopeless, then how did they get through all these situations? Again, some of them through luck. The movie clearly does have some hope, at least. Otherwise, if the movie had no hope, Theo would probably just have not left the coffee shop. He would have been killed in that first bombing, and when, Patrick shot, I think it was him who shot Julian, then, maybe he would have hit Key too, and the movie would have ended there, And this, I think this is from a critic, paid critic review, professional critic review, which I don't say as any kind of, I don't mean that to put down, user reviews. Anyway, it's a sophisticated notion handled fairly deftly in what might be the first film of the 21st century to ponder the end of humanity as it is most likely to occur, slowly, with lots of time to think about it. And I think that is an excellent point, and that's something the movie does incredibly well, because that is absolutely true. That is what climate change, it's possible that through, colonies on, the moon or Mars or something, maybe we will survive, but things are going to get much, much worse, and there's not going to be a lot we can do about that here on Earth. And that's going to be something where people also, at some point, people will just accept there's, unless, there are, yeah, possibly with colonies, but if not that, then yeah, ultimately it will just be this. Well, there are people in the movie who don't really accept completely that it's that hopeless. So, you would have some that would hold out, but a lot of people would just be, yeah, it would happen slowly with a lot of time to think about it. Now, let's see. I think, yeah, I'm not gonna read out that review. And now, let's see. Let's see. This one reviewer, he gave it a 1 out of 10, and he said, I sort of enjoyed the movie for a while until the nonsense about refugee camps. And when it started to look like all this film brought up was questions with no cohesion. And Just, yeah. And then he says, specifically, if you think the characters developed and evolved throughout the movie, and all the different ideas were stuck together, well, then you are nuts. You know, if you're trying to make the case that you're not, you know, that you understood the movie, and, you know, maybe don't call people who disagree with you nuts just because, yeah. And let's see. The camp thing was nuts. If the regime was so oppressive, they would have just killed them all, and it seemed to morph from an anti-fugitive thing at the start of the movie into an anti-Muslim thing, and there were also Caucasians in there. Very bizarre. I guess he doesn't think that it's possible that all the different groups were all refugees, and that the government in the movie would be all against all refugees, not just... Yeah. And let's see. Yeah, and then, you know, he goes on to say, you know, yeah, it doesn't explain what difference one baby could have made, and I don't know. I tried to explain that in the, which I'm not saying he should have somehow been able to watch that before he wrote the review. I'm just saying, if you agree with him, you know, yeah, I gave my explanation earlier in this video. And now, and I've reached the bottom. Now let's see. And yeah, I guess that's... I thought I had more notes, but yeah, just, you know, various negative reviews say that the characters don't change over the movie, which, again, I feel I've countered fairly recently. And yeah, I'm sorry, I don't... Maybe they felt it... Maybe it was too vague, that those reviewers felt, you know, didn't think it was there. I don't know. Again, I'm not saying that, you know, the... What's I going to say? Still recording. Yeah, you know, if that's how you feel about it, then that's how you feel about it. Is that how you feel about it? Let's see. Yes, I think I have argued against the points that I think are worth arguing against. And yes, so yeah, I absolutely love the movie, and that sentence bookends this video very nicely. I hope you enjoyed watching, as I enjoyed recording, and I will catch you next time.